on the west side, roughly, and the 16th on the east side. I am so grateful that we have Sherry Bustos representing not just half of Rockford. I know that she cares about all of Rockford, which is critical. And I admire her because she puts her actions where her beliefs are. She said that we need more people running for office, we need more women running for office, and she started Build a Bench on her own. And she shares her experience about how she ran for office and encouraging other people to run for office. She brings in her campaign team and experts, and they talk about how you build a campaign, how you talk about who you are, how you develop, how you message why you are running, and how you raise money. That part I don't care for. That part needs to change. But it's a one-day course, and her campaign staff remains available for anyone that goes through the Build the Bench training. So the candidates can call and ask for questions. And I think that's one of the big reasons we have so many Democrats filling ballot slots where we never did before. Because Sherry Bustos is taking the time to put her actions where her beliefs are. And we're very lucky to have her. Adam Kinzinger hasn't had a Build the Bench, to my knowledge. Oh,
Sarah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Sarah, prior to 1929, there has never been a period in this nation's history where the income inequality is as great as it is today. We all know what happened in October of 1929. The middle class has been getting hammered. I think we've all seen the chart since about 1979, where the worker pay, which was pretty much kept in pace with productivity, started to go this way. Right, the minimum wage was originally set, I believe, at 120% of the poverty rate. Right now, if you're a minimum wage worker in this country, there's not a single state in this country that you could afford an apartment and afford to live a life that is above the poverty level. What are your feelings on minimum wage?
I think we need to increase the minimum wage. And I think that there's never just one solution to a problem, because there's never just one cause to a problem. And with the wage stagnation, where I sit, I attribute that to the constant undermining of unions in this country. We've established that balance is very important to me since I went to college, right? Fairness and balance. Employers have a lot of power. Employers tell you how much they're going to pay you and what your benefits are going to be. The larger an employer gets, the further removed they are from their employees. That's why we need unions. We need unions so all the employees can band together and negotiate for higher pay and better benefits, to share in the profits that their employers make that they otherwise would not. We live in a time of record corporate profits, do we not? Record corporate profits, and yet the wages continue to stagnate. And yet we've got a Republican Congress telling us that our corporations are not competitive in the world when they're making record corporate profits. They tell us that it should be harder to join a union or easier to leave a union because corporations need to be more competitive. And corporations can't compete when, I don't know, we have employees that make a livable wage and have job security. That's backwards. And it's the undermining of the unions that has really contributed to the stagnation of middle class wages. When it comes to minimum wage, you're absolutely right. Minimum wage adjusted for inflation should be what? Over $10 an hour now, minimally. That's minimum wage, but that doesn't make it a livable wage. So a livable wage, we're looking at $15 an hour for an individual, right? As a Democrat, I absolutely believe that government has a role to play in improving people's lives, and that includes making sure that everyone has a livable wage. That's key. And here's also why. When people are just struggling to get through the day, trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, one car breakdown, one sick kid, lose their slot at daycare, then they lose their job. What democracy becomes a luxury, self-governance becomes a luxury when people are just struggling to get through the day. It promotes our country when all of our citizens have economic security. Then we can be more engaged. Then we govern ourselves. Who benefits? And the majority of people are not participating, not voting, not paying attention. Democrats don't benefit. So yes, I support a livable wage, a minimum wage increase, absolutely.
Thank you.
And I also support universal child care, which is an issue we never talk about. At my firm, when I started my firm, I started out of my house and my kids were there. And then when I moved to an office, my kids came with me. And then when I moved to a bigger office, my kids came with me. And then when Beth and I formed Dady and Hoffman, all of our employees' kids came with us. Our employees are our greatest asset. They helped us build the relationships with our client, do the work that we do. And we want to make sure they're happy and they're not struggling. Whatever we can do to ease economic insecurity, we do. Childcare is ridiculously expensive. It's over $1,000 a month. Now what? The Senate, because of Marco Rubio, are going to increase the child tax credit to $2,000 a year. That doesn't pay for 2 months of childcare. So our employees bring their kids to work, and it gets a little disruptive, but it's totally worth it. But that's one law firm, you know. Unless you work for Dady and Hoffman, you're not bringing your kids to work. You got to make childcare arrangements. And then on those days when your kid is too sick for daycare but not really that sick, what do? Minimum wage, childcare is a big, big factor for workers and middle-class families, the cost of childcare. That we need to be talking about more. Health insurance. For me, health insurance, universal health care is a moral issue for me, but it's also an economic issue. At my firm, we provide medical insurance to our employees. We started out paying 50% of our employees' premiums, but guess what? It goes up every year, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Humana. So every October, my law partner, Beth, spends a good 8 to 10 hours of her time trying to figure out the new insurance plan, which is going to be least expensive even though they all go up. And the very first year we figured out if we continue to only pay 50% of the premium for our employees, with their increased portion, the raises that we gave them would get eaten up. They would not get those raises effectively. So Beth and I, every year, we increase the employer part of the premium that we pay. Now we're up to 75%. Paying 75% of our employees' premiums so they can actually feel their pay raises, but it's unsustainable for us as a firm, as an employer. That system is unsustainable. If we didn't have to pay that much to provide medical benefits to our employees, we could hire 1.5 new positions. We could reinvest in our firm. I know I'm not the only employer that feels that way. You know, if we had universal health care in this country like every other first world nation in the world, if we had that, that would make us more competitive. One of the reasons we're not as competitive, so we're being told, is guess what? All of those other companies don't have to pay health insurance for their employees outside of the United States. We do. And small employers in particular feel it. And we're not going to stop paying for it because our employees are our greatest assets. So that needs to be addressed. But it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable the way that it's going. I also know people who would love to start a small business, but they're terrified of losing their access, their employer-sponsored health care, to go out and start that business. And here, you know, small businesses account for 2 out of every 3 new jobs. Small business is the backbone of our economy, and we're inhibiting the growth of small business and economic productivity because of our insistence that employer-sponsored health care should be the linchpin of our system.
So, I don't know how this works in a primary, but about where you would get the support, or where unions are in this, like, are you getting some support from unions at this point in your run?
I have not been endorsed by any unions. Most of what I hear, and I do reach out to union members because I believe in it. It's part of my platform, collective bargaining. In a primary, lots of organizations will not endorse, and I think that that's right. The county parties here in the 16th, by and large, are against endorsing in a primary, and I think that that's right, because we're Democrats. You know, eventually we're going to pick our Democratic nominees after the primary. But it's my job to go out to all of our Democrats and our like-minded voters and make my case for why I should be the Democratic nominee. It's not the party's job to make that case before the primary. That's our job to do that. So I would hope that I'm going to win the primary. That's my goal. And then be the officially endorsed Democratic candidate, and then build those coalitions with like-minded people and organizations that share the same vision that I do.
Have you been able to speak to most of the county Democratic parties?
Yes. How many people here know how many counties are in the 16th Congressional District? Cassie does, I know. You do too. How many?
20.
17.
14. 14 counties and parts of counties. You were close. Don't make it more than it already is, please. So I have now been to 13 of the 14 counties multiple times. The only one I've not been to is Stark County. Apparently there's no place to meet in our sliver of Stark County that we have. There's 70 Democrats that live there. God help them, I'm calling them all on Sunday. Sunday is my day to call Stark County Democrats.
We have a suggestion. Call Jim Nolan. He's an opportunity Democrat now, as he describes himself, but he was a Republican legislator, and he runs the local newspaper there.
I'm calling him.
Yeah.
Cassie, you wrote that, she's Googling him right now.
He was on our Money and Politics panel. And
Yes, I'm gonna call him,
And
because
our
Stark County
best
is the only county in this district that does not have a Democratic Central Committee. All the other ones do. And that's why I'm calling those 70 Dems on Sunday. We're gonna find somebody that wants to have a coffee. We're gonna find somebody to get some people in the same room. The Illinois Valley Dems here are awesome, I have to say. I'm from Winnebago County, and we've got a great party. Boone County's got a great party. What's going on in Lee County is amazing with Action for a Better Tomorrow. If you've heard about that group that started after the election, they're really shaking some trees in Lee County. But what I love about the Illinois Valley Democrats is you've got the 3 counties, right? And you've got the 3 county chairs that get together and meet frequently, and then you've got the larger Illinois Valley Dems meeting, bringing all 3 counties together and working together and building those bridges. And that's exactly how we win. That is how we will win. So last night, I'm in Livingston County. And Livingston, Ford, Iroquois, right? I've been to Iroquois. I met with the 8 Democrats that live in Iroquois. And I've been in Ford and met way more Republicans than Democrats. That's okay. And we were talking about this, and I said, you know, I described what Illinois Valley Dems is doing. And this young woman, she drove up from Iroquois to meet me in Livingston, this meet and greet, all the way up from Iroquois, and she saw it because they put it in the paper in Pontiac that I was having this meet and greet in these good Dems' home. And she drove all the way up, and I said, this is exactly what we need to do. And she goes, yeah. She goes, you know what? I want to start getting Iroquois, Ford, and Livingston all in the same room. And I said, that's exactly right. We're going to start building those bridges. And my campaign is committed to doing that because while 2018 is important, so is 2020, and so is 2022 and 2024. And this is how we strengthen participation in our political process. This is how we get more people interested in running for office because we've laid a foundation and the support is there. There should never be a ballot where a Democrat isn't running, especially in deep red counties. This is how we make change.
This is more of your opinion question than anything, but.
My favorite.
I think that being a business person, you probably can have better insight of the way that, all the indications look like this present tax plan is gonna go through, it's gonna be passed. And the administration has, since this has become a big topic, has touted the fact that, quote unquote, the tax cuts that big corporations are gonna get are gonna lead to a tremendous growth in the economy. What's your opinion on that?
I think that was the same argument that was made in the 80s, and I'm still waiting for it.
Okay.
Do you feel it? Does anyone feel it yet?
I agree with you.
I don't feel it.
We could ask Kansas how well it did.
Yeah.
Well, once again,
Yeah.
we're at a time of record corporate profits. Record corporate profits, and we have yet to see any sort of corresponding increase in employee pay and benefits, right? They say they're not competitive, and they need these tax cuts to be more competitive. Record corporate profits. On top of that, businesses hire more people when there's more demand for their services, right? That's when businesses hire. I have more demand for my services, but I don't hire because I have to pay all this health insurance, right? That's what's inhibiting me. It's not how much I pay in taxes that's inhibiting me.
Could you comment on the Supreme Court's decision to allow the ban to go ahead and be a ban on immigration until it's fought out in the courts?
Yeah, it makes me sick. It makes me feel physically sick inside. I think the Supreme Court made the wrong decision, and what I find particularly troubling is that we have a president who will be appointing even more Supreme Court justices, and once they get appointed and they make decisions like this, we have to live with it on average 50 years
Is there
before it gets
anything
reversed.
that we can do as a poor little voter?
Yeah. We need to get a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate.
Right,
That's the only thing that we can do.
okay.
We have to reassert the balance in DC. And, you know,
Does public opinion do anything to
influence the Supreme Court?
Supreme Court?
No, no. And that's the way it should be. I
Right.
mean, the Supreme Court has a specific role. They're supposed to be completely removed from the political process. But what we can't do is get a Democratic majority in Congress that can pass legislation to reverse this ban.
Which leads me to the next question about gerrymandering. And, you know, what's happened recently in Pennsylvania, I believe they have to now open up the records on how districts were, you know, created. Are there any issues, as far as you're concerned, in the state of Illinois that have the same kind of parallel situation?
Well, I mentioned Rockford earlier, right?
Right.
Has anyone looked at the shape of the 17th and the 16th? I was talking to some friends and they're like, oh, well, you've got a lot of friends over there in that area of Rockford. I go, that would be the 17th. That's not the 16th. And this is what happens when we have fewer people engaged in our process, right? That these lines get drawn, and what ends up happening is that political parties pick their voters. The voters are not picking their parties or their representatives, right? And that's dangerous to democracy. That's dangerous to our republic. Who's here from the press? You're here from the press. Do you think it's better that more people read your articles or fewer people read them?
Well, I'd like to see more people read them, of course.
Yes, and if he runs an article about an independent map board to draw congressional districts, but nobody's reading it, what does it matter? And I think that is very dangerous. I support an independent map board to draw districts.
How can again,
And I also think that encourages more people to run, unlike, in the 16th, Adam Kinzinger hasn't had a strong challenger because it's a red district. And so then not only are we being told who our representative has to be, but then all the money that you need to attract to a race to have a strong candidate will not come because the pundits all say the 16th isn't competitive. Well, I say, we make that decision. We live here, we decide who our representative is. Nobody else tells us, and no one is gonna tell us. We are a red district, and our fate is predetermined.
Steve, sorry.
You might be doing a follow-up.
Sorry.
Since she asked me a question. And you know the answer to this question. Who drew the maps
The political party that's in charge.
and who would that be?
I know.
Who would that be?
That would be the Democratic majority in Springfield.
Okay.
I am well aware. And here's the thing. Both parties are guilty. And both parties in Congress are guilty of the way that we run our elections. The question is, how are we gonna change it? And the only way to change it is by electing new people.
Follow up on that, because as I recall, we were trying to get on the last year's ballot in Illinois of setting up a separate board to do the districts. And there was a judge in Chicago that said it was unconstitutional to put that on the ballot. What was the basis for that decision?
I don't know the basis for that decision. I do federal law. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can look into it. I assume it has something to do with the Illinois Constitution, saying that what's appropriate for referendums and what isn't. But that's important because we have a census coming up, right, in 2020, and what happens after the census? Redistricting. And Illinois has been suffering population loss across the state, Rockford in particular. Rockford, when I was growing up, we were the second largest city. Very proud of that. Second largest city. Now we're the fourth, probably gonna be the fifth largest city because of population loss. And we're suffering so much that we might lose a congressional seat, which diminishes our representation in Washington, D.C. So maps are gonna be redrawn in 2020, and that's a conversation we should all be having in this state now about how we're gonna redraw those districts.
Steve?
Back to the corporations, theoretically, I can see an argument that the corporate tax could be lowered to make them more competitive with the rest of the world. But what disturbs me with that, and a friend of mine who spent a lot of time in the investment banking industry and I think knows wherever he speaks, and is a good Democrat, said, they're just gonna bring those assets back into the United States and they're gonna start buying up their own stock to drive the stock prices up and therefore increase their stock options. And I'm sure that's probably likely to happen. I don't know any way to approach that other than to jack up the capital gains tax to make that course a little less attractive. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's important to consider all possible strategies. And I have a problem, and this might be too big of a scope, and certainly it's too big for one representative. But our tax code is based on territorial taxing, right? The location of the headquarters, residence, right? That's how our tax code is set up. Why is it set up that way? Anyone know? Tradition.
This is America we're talking about here.
No, it came from Britain, you know, merry old England. The tradition is why we have it territorial based. Why can't we consider if it wasn't territorial based, but it was profit based? The profits that you make in the United States are taxed in the United States. I don't know, the biggest problem that we have is corporations say, well, if you don't cut our tax rate, if you don't let us do what we want, we're just gonna move jobs overseas. Well, they do that anyway. I feel like we are at a severe disadvantage. We're stuck with the threats of corporations threatening to move jobs away if they don't get what they want, and that's an imbalance. I think that government has a role to play with evening the playing field there, and maybe we should remove the legitimacy of some of those threats that they continue to make. I also disagree with the idea that there are winners and losers, right? And I think that the GOP tax plan that you're absolutely right is likely to pass next week, now that Marco Rubio has been satisfied. It sets very clearly who are winners and who are losers, and that is a particular worldview that we see from this GOP. And what that tax plan, that tax bill is telling us is that the middle class and your average citizen, we are losers. That is the clear message from that tax plan. Corporations are winners. And we will never be winners unless we can somehow form a corporation and become billionaires. That's the only way to become a winner in the GOP worldview under this tax plan. And that's a serious problem. I have a serious problem with that.
But as long as corporations are, or any employer are as free as they are these days to move jobs and employment wherever they choose to some degree, I mean, that as much as anything has undercut the unions. You wanna argue with us? Fine. Go look for another job or going elsewhere.
Well, they always make that threat, and sometimes they follow through and sometimes they don't. But I think that it's always important to have a parallel strategy. And, you know, large corporations at one point started out as a small business. Why are we catering to giant corporations as if that's the salvation of the United States of America? We need to make sure that we're fostering the growth of small businesses as well, and make sure that the expectations are set. I mean, with my business, my firm, it's federal law. I could locate my firm anywhere in the country. I could move my firm to Beloit, 15 minutes away from my house, and, you know, take advantage of Wisconsin's lower tax rates, right? I don't do that because I love Illinois, I love Rockford, I love my home. And we don't talk a lot about that, and we never talk about, when it comes to corporations, about pride in their country and loyalty to their country. Apparently, we can only ever talk about money and competitiveness to make more money instead of loyalty to the country.
Does Wisconsin have a lower corporate tax rate? They certainly don't have a lower state
Income tax rate.
For corporations, they certainly
For
don't for
individuals.
personal income. No matter how much Chicago Tribune's been bellowing that for years, we're not surrounded by lower income tax states. We just aren't.
Well, not to hear Scott
Except
Walker
for
talk
Indiana.
about
I was gonna say, don't get too excited about Wisconsin.
it. Well, I have no desire to move, I like Wisconsin, they've got Great Lakes, but
Minnesota's better.
Minnesota has more lakes.
You know, one of the unfortunate results of this past election and the political climate now, there are many people who are just tired of party politics. And I wonder all the time about whether, I mean, what is the role of party politics? It amazes me that the votes in Congress boil down to every single Democrat has to vote for this, or every single Republican has to vote for this. I don't think the elections, I mean, I love what you're saying today. I don't think you can get elected unless you say and do and you represent people who will vote for you aside from party politics. Because frankly, party politics turn me off and turn lots of people off. We won't even read the paper. We know it's a Republican or a Democrat or a progressive or this or that.
See, that inhibits the freedom of the press
And
more
I
than
know,
anything
but
else.
that is an issue. I mean, I write the papers, I read them, I listen to the radio all day, I watch public TV, blah, blah, blah. There are issues with party politics, both inside the Democratic and Republican Party. How do you position yourself in that world that says, I know I have to depend on, want to depend on, I am a Democrat, but I also need these people over here who wouldn't vote for a Democrat for millions of dollars. How do you do the next step, which is get them to vote for you?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out as I run for office, right? You know, I think this is a product of the human condition. Humans are social animals. I mean, it doesn't even matter if it's Republican, Democrat, Congress. We get together and we have our own groups, and we like to hang out with people that think the same way that we do. And that's what it is to be human. The issue is, how do we make sure that one like-minded group of people are not running everything for everybody? And that's supposed to be the role of the two parties, right? Why are we a two-party system? Well, we don't have to be. We could have more parties if we set the system that way. But at the end of the day, I come back to personal responsibility as citizens. That's what it is. You know, I know Democrats, we win when more people are engaged in the process. It behooves the Democratic Party to bring more people in and get more people engaged. Republicans lose when fewer people are engaged. I mean, yeah, they win when fewer people are engaged. That seems to be the way that it is. And I'm a Democrat, and I will always be an advocate for the Democratic Party, because this is what I believe. Even though not all Democrats agree on every particular issue, we share the same worldview. And our party is the party for working people.